dance. All right, yes, it worked this time. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technical Difficulties Galore. All right, for real though, welcome to MECHS, Magic, and Mayhem interviews with sci-fi and fantasy authors. I am your host, Edie Sky, and if you've been watching this a while, you will notice that, hey, this name is kind of new. The reason for that is because when I first started doing this series of podcasts, I kind of just did it for fun and made up a random clunky name and just kind of threw it up on YouTube. And then there came a point where people were like, hey, we really like your podcast. We really like your show. And I had never considered myself a podcaster, but it seemed that I needed a better name than author Q&A and sometimes prizes. So, welcome to the second episode of my rebranding. It is going to be MECHS, Magic, and Mayhem from now on, and you're still going to get the same fun crew of sci-fi and fantasy authors. And today we have one of my favorites, Patrick Chiles. So welcome, Patrick. We're going to be talking about his newest release. But before I allow him to introduce himself, there's all the fun podcast stuff I have to go through. First off, if you're having any fun at all watching this, be sure to like, subscribe, click on whatever platform you're enjoying this on to get more of my stuff. Also, we're going to be giving away a signed copy of Patrick's latest book, Interstellar Medic: The Long Way Home. If you would like to enter to win that, there's a link in the show notes wherever you're watching, but I am also about to put a link to that form in the chat. And let me see here. Oh, I guess I should probably open my chat. Oh, there's already people in the chat. Hey, Glenn, you are awesome. All right, so there's that link. Also, the book is already out, right? It came out Tuesday.
Came out Tuesday.
Yes. All right. So if you have no patience and want to go ahead and grab it, I'm putting that in the comments too. And also, this is a book from Bane Books, and since it is a Bane book, Bane is allowing me to stream on their YouTube channels and their Facebook. So thank you, Bane, for allowing me to do that. And I'm going to put another link in the comments or in the chat where it's a link to Bane's books. Go read everything they published. It's awesome. And also, let's see here. Oh, I think that's actually the end of my list. So, Patrick, you've written a lot of my favorite stuff. And today we are here to talk about Interstellar Medic 2. But before we do that, I want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your books, and then we will start talking about the Interstellar Medic series. So have at it.
Well, hi everybody. Yep. Yeah, I've been writing with Bain now for, well, first book was published in 2020. But I was working on it for long before that. I had a couple of self-published books around 2012, 2015, and a reviewer who really liked them knew Tony and asked if he could forward those to her, and I was like, of course, yes. How much should I pay you for a finder's fee? So I was fortunate enough. Bain picked up those two as ebooks, Perigee and Farside, and then asked me what everybody wants to hear, which is, what do you have next? And they picked that up, Frozen Orbit, and so Long Way Home is my fifth book with Bain.
Cool. All right. Now, well, you know what? Actually, before we get into my other questions, let's talk about the Interstellar Medic series. So this is book 2. So first, I want you to tell us about what the series as a whole is about, but then also tell us, do we need to have read book 1 to continue into book 2?
You don't have to have read book 1. Everything I've written, my first book's Frozen Orbit, Escape Orbit. I drop enough from the first book, enough details here and there, kind of sprinkle them throughout the opening chapters to where anybody can pick it up and know what was going on and know how the characters got where they are. So The Long Way Home is the same, although you'll enjoy it a lot more if you read the first book. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of fun. That's where the character Melanie Mooney really gets established. Plus all the characters of the different aliens that she's working with now, and all the world building for this galactic union that she's a part of, and the medical corps that she's been recruited for. So people will have a much better, deeper understanding. I think they'll get more enjoyment out of it. But you don't have to. You'll get enough to be able to understand how she got where she is.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of which, let's talk about that, because book 1 is basically how she got where she is. Tell us a little bit, tell us about Melanie Mooney, like who she is as a character, what exactly got her to be the interstellar medic of the title?
Well, she's in no way, shape, or form based on my wife. No, well, you've met Melissa a couple of times at cons.
Oh yeah.
She's a nurse. She started as an EMT. So I picked up a lot from her. And, she was my go-to technical resource, her and the doctors and nurses that she's worked with. I also spent time with our local fire department, going on ride-along ambulance runs and talking to the medics there and listening to their stories. So yeah, Melanie's a paramedic, started as a veterinary student, left veterinary school to go into emergency medicine. And the reasons for that are cut kind of deep with her, and that's laid out in the first book. There's some explanation of it in the second, but if you really want to know why she went from becoming a veterinary doctor to being a medic, you'll find out there. So she ended up where she is because she was getting a little burned out in her job. I mean, in emergency medicine, any kind of EMS first responder work is kind of a burnout job.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You've got to have some change in it, or, the medics I talked to said most people last about 10 years.
I get that. Cause it's one of those where even if you enjoy what you're doing, and even if like you're doing something valuable for society, sometimes you just see so much rough stuff that you can't take it past a certain point. I totally get that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They see a lot of ugly stuff. There's a lot of rewarding things that happen in it. There's a lot of things that, horrible things happen. They can only sit back and watch. At some point, or they've done everything they can and they still lose the patient. And one aspect of it too that I don't think enough people appreciate. I came to appreciate my prior career in aviation. It is also a 24/7 business. There are a limited number of people who are qualified to do the things that you're doing, and somebody's got to be there 24/7. So you miss there's a lot of night work. There's a lot of weekends and holidays that get missed. You can be counting on days off, and then somebody else calls in sick, and now somebody else has to give up their time off to cover for that guy. And that really wears on you. And single people can handle it better, but if you've got a family, boy, it's tough. It's a tough life. But even single people, and I hinted at this with Melanie, it's, it affects their social lives. And so Melanie's coming home from work one night early in the morning, like still dark after a long night shift. And she lives out in the country in Indiana. She comes across a plane crash in the woods. She can't raise anybody on the radio. She's the only one there on scene. So she responds. And of course, it's not a plane crash.
Yeah.
She doesn't remember it. That's how she remembers it. But eventually she realizes that is not what it was. And she gets swept up into this, galaxy spanning alien civilization that she used to make fun of, tabloid stories and alien abduction stories. And, so she's drawn up into this world that she just thought was, the stuff of crazy people's legends. And I had a lot of fun with that. I had a lot of fun making fun of it, all of the alien abduction tropes and the UFO trailer park stories, and, she gets digging into the history of the Union and finding out all these things that they've been observing for thousands of years, and she's like, holy crap, all those crazy stories are real. And so she's brought in, her background lends her to doing things that a lot of the Galactic Union medics can't do or won't do. One of the things that I established with the world building is it's a bunch of different cultures of different species. And for the most part, when it comes to medicine, they're pretty reluctant to render care for anybody outside of their own species. Well, Melanie was studying to be a vet, and she grew up on a farm. She's not afraid of that. She's used to learning how to treat patients who couldn't tell her what was wrong with them. So yeah, that makes her a good candidate. She realizes too that she's kind of a guinea pig for the rest of the human race.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they brought her in to see how she does before they decide to make first contact with us. So there's a little bit of a heavy
Oh
weight
yeah.
on her
And
shoulders
I
too.
love the way you introduced her character in book 1 too, because she sees this crash thing and automatically runs toward it, which is maybe a little dangerous, but she gets there, she finds this injured person and is like, "Oh, this person, I don't think this is a human, but I got a job to do." And so she goes forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's like, yes, that is good hero material. I love it. So,
Well, you know that. I mean, I was going to write that anyway, but the paramedics I talked to really kind of helped bring it to life. Um, Especially the local battalion chief is a big sci-fi fan, and so when I reached out to, I did not know this guy before, and I
mhm.
reached out to him and found out he was, and he was super excited about the project, and he just opened everything up and was an enormous help. And um, yeah, but you know, one of the things that he told me is, yeah, it can be a problem because ideally, you know, you're supposed to wait till the scene is secure,
Mhm.
that you know it's safe to go in. But he said a lot of times circumstances just don't allow
Yeah,
that.
sometimes you just can't
If you
wait.
sit and wait, yeah, if you sit and wait to make, you know, for somebody to tell you that building's stable, you know, you could lose whoever's
Mhm.
inside. You know, and he had one instance where he and another firefighter, you know, ran headlong into a building that had partially collapsed,
Mm.
to, you know, to get people out. And he said, you know, it doesn't seem right, but you know, you can't get in trouble for that kind of thing. And Melanie's been repeatedly getting into trouble for doing that kind of thing.
Mhm.
She's got, and again, it comes out later in the book is why she made that big career
Mhm.
switch. And you know, to her it's a personal thing, and she's not willing to wait around for somebody to tell her, okay, it's good
Right.
for you to go now.
Right. Now with book 2, by the time book 2 starts, she's already been doing her interstellar medic stuff for a bit. And the entire point of book 2 is the long way home. She's trying to get home, but she has to deal with relativity and time dilation and the fact that
Yeah.
as she's in space, everyone she knows back home, is aging differently and whatnot. So my first question there is when you're dealing with terms like relativity, that leans toward hard sci-fi. And sometimes, well, hard sci-fi is sometimes hard to read. So I have to ask, where on the like hard sci-fi readability scale would you say this leans? Is it really heavy math, like you got to turn on your brain and pay attention and take notes? Or is it, do you write it so that it's fairly accessible to people like me who know nothing of even normal people math?
Yeah, yeah. I try to make it accessible as possible. I mean, you know, my other books are hard sci-fi, you know, techno thrillers, and you know, I really get into the nuts and bolts, and still try to make it entertaining. You know, like Tom Clancy was a huge influence and inspiration for me early on, but you know, I'm also aware of his
Mm-hmm.
shortcomings. You know, character development could be a little thin. Um, Lots of info dumps, huge info dumps. And you know, and I love that stuff in the 80s, you know, when I was a college student and a young Marine, and I thought this is fantastic, you know. But you know, now that I'm older, and writing myself, I can see, um, you know, I can see where people would have a
Mm-hmm.
problem with that.
It's two
But
different reading
um,
styles. Like sometimes I'm really in the mood for
yeah,
detailed hard sci-fi, but then sometimes I'm not. And
yeah, and with these books, these are the first kind of, this is a departure from hard sci-fi for me. You know, I had never really written, you know, space alien warp drive phaser
yeah.
gun science fiction before. You know, real kind of space opera. Um, but you know, Melanie's a current day human character coming from our current day world. You know, so there's a grounding in reality there. And relativity, you can't get away from. I don't care how advanced your civilization is. You know, there's no getting around it. So, you know, um, that had to be kind of a limiting
Mm-hmm.
factor with the storytelling, you know, because you can't just have all, you know, wave a magic wand and all these things go away,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, you know, so working that in, I took a lot, you know, took some liberties. You know, there's a scene where she's explaining to the reader, and again, I try to avoid huge exposition dumps. Work it into the dialogue where it makes sense. Or her narration about how much more of a factor it becomes the faster you
Mm-hmm.
go. And once you get above about 70% light speed, it starts going up
Mm-hmm.
exponentially. So, and that's about as much detail as I went. And these are all real factors. I did not make these
Mm-hmm.
up. There was a conversion table on the Atomic Rocket site, which I recommend to anybody who's interested in writing realistic science
Mm-hmm.
fiction. It is one-stop shopping. It's a great resource, and it's not the be-all end-all, but boy, it'll get you 90% of the way. If you want to dig deeper, you got to do the other 10%.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a whole conversion table, based on percentage of light
Mm-hmm.
speed, 50%, 60, and so forth. And it's just a simple multiplication. So that's what I did. And, so yeah, she's been with the Union about 5 years now, but she's gone back and figured out that Earth is almost 20 years ahead of her.
Ooh.
And if she keeps going the way she's going, there won't be any point in going back because it'll be so far beyond
Mm-hmm.
her that it'll be as unrecognizable as the alien worlds that she's working in now.
That's a conflict I can understand. Even if I can't relate to it and will never have to struggle with this conflict, it's like, yeah, I miss my family after not seeing them for a week. So it's like, yeah, if I'm out in space and Anyway, I'm gonna go to the chat.
Yeah, well,
I'm gonna go to the chat for a little bit.
mhm.
Where first off, John Piper, hey John, says it's layperson accessible. I just read it, so thank you, John, for reading.
Thank you.
And then also, Carrie David is in here saying, good evening. I won the signed copy of Escape Orbit from that YouTube interview that I did a while back, and bought Frozen Orbit and really enjoyed both of them. I'll be checking out this series too. So thank you, Carrie.
I'm
And
glad you did.
I remember, I want to say it was Escape Orbit. Escape Orbit was one of your books that really impressed Jacob. And I remember my first memory of you as an author is Jacob coming to me and being like, hey, I think I'm going to ask Patrick Chiles to read my new book so I can make sure that the space science is right in it, because he's obviously worked in space science. Like he obviously has some space experience. And because this book is just too detailed for it to not be. And then we meet you at what? Oh, was it LibertyCon or Fantasy? And we're chatting with you, and it's like, no, you just
I think
research really well.
it was one or the other. Yeah, we did both that year. I think it might have been Fantasy when we first met you guys. No, it was LibertyCon.
They're
Year
both so
before that.
similar. They're basically the same family in two different spots. And so it's easy for me to get them mixed up. But yeah, guys, if
Yeah.
you like well-researched sci-fi, go for Patrick's stuff. Because, I mean, I remember being just amazed that you had no space background from what Jacob said about that book. And we have a question from Glenn. And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but you can add more if you want to. Ever have a conflict in what science says is law versus what you need to do to get a character home? So I guess the way of phrasing that is like, what rules did you kind of have to tease, if any, to make your plot work? Now, because I know a lot of the authors in our circle have this rule where it's like when they're writing sci-fi, they get one gimmick, like one science rule they can break, and everything else has to be accurate. But they have that one rule. And so, do you have a rule like that? Did you tweak any rules for that in this book?
If I did, it wasn't intentional, because finding a way around relativity. So she needs to get
Mm-hmm.
home, and she's feeling time slipping away from her. Well, okay, if she, the ways that she has to get home are part of the conflict. She can take the slow boat, and it'll take decades, and she'll be in hibernation or something. Or she can go the fast way and still have the relativity issues to deal with, and Earth is still going to be way ahead of her. So she's feeling trapped and stuck. And not to mention, she can't afford either one. The events that happened at the end of the long run, where the Union loses about a third of its refining capability for the element they need that powers these gravity drives. which is another UFO story trope I pulled
Mhm.
from Element 115. People that follow that stuff will know what I'm talking about. So there's been a big shortage of it. So it's hard to get. Interstellar travel is becoming a lot more expensive throughout the Union. Different races are trying to find alternative sources, and it's pretty dangerous. Um, and so what I came up with is a method to basically leave our space and punch through into other dimensions, higher dimensions that where really time just
Mhm.
is. There's no past, there's no
Hmm.
future, there's no now. It's all everything that has happened, everything that's going to happen. It's all at once. You're outside of our notions of time and space. Um, I've read some theories on that. I have not gone deep into the research papers. I just kind of got the general overview and thought, okay, that matches what I'm
Mhm.
trying to do. I think I'm going to run with this. One is that time is actually three dimensional,
Mhm.
and so that we actually live in six dimensional space. We can't perceive it.
Mhm.
We're not equipped to. And so what I went with in the book is most races aren't. There's one race in the Union that they can see that it's there, but they can't interact with it.
Mm.
So I compare it to being able to look out the window and see what's out there, but not being able to go
Mhm.
outside.
Makes sense.
And so the only other human in the Union who's not very well liked um, has also needs to get back to Earth, and he's figured out a way to do it. He's figured out a way to punch
Mhm.
through. And so it's essentially creating singularities, with them at the center.
Mhm.
So yeah, that would be the hand wavium that somehow magically they don't get crushed by the gravity field that
Uh-huh.
they're creating
So let's talk about this only
because
the
reasons.
the only other human in the Union, because I mean it's pretty spectacular to be a human in the Union to begin with. So what's his story? Or does he play a
Uh,
large role in the novel?
he
I
plays a
haven't read it
large
yet.
role.
Full confession.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, he plays a large role. I don't want to give away too
Oh,
much
okay.
here. Again, he's introduced in the first
Okay.
book as being something of an antagonist
Mhm.
to Melanie. Um, he research that he was doing is what caused this planetary disaster. It's the
Oh,
climax
I
of the
see.
story, and the reason behind this element, and that's the reason behind this element 115 shortage. That the planet was basically one big, you know, um, generation plant and
Mm.
refinery. And so, but again, he's been in the union for a very long time, and how he gets there, I don't want to say. I think it's going to give away some of the fun
Okay, yeah.
parts of it,
No spoilers.
and it gets into yeah, and but again, he's very old in human years. The union medicine has enabled him to live longer. With synthetic organs generated and gene tweaking and stuff like that. But there's no getting around it at the end. He's at the end of his life,
Mhm.
and he's got reasons to get back
Mhm.
to. And he's been spying on Melanie, and he suspects she's ready to get
Mhm.
back. So he makes her an offer she can't refuse. And so, yeah, to get home, she's got to rely on unproven technology and some very shady characters. And they run into more shady characters along the way because they're trying to avoid union detection.
Ah.
Um, yeah. And they're also trying to avoid being detected by other beings that don't like the fact they figured out how to punch holes through other dimensions.
Mm.
So there's a little bit of a chase going on here.
Oh, yes, that actually
So
leads
yeah,
me into
they're
my
trying to
next question. Oh, yeah. You can continue.
they're trying to stay one step ahead of bad guys they can't see.
I see. Oh, I love those kinds of stories. I love good chases. All right, so let's talk about some of these bad guys. Like, what kinds of organizations are after them, and why do they have to keep it secret from the Union that they're trying to get home?
Well, he's afraid the union's going to confiscate all his materials.
Well, that's reasonable, yeah. But
Um,
why? What about
he
Melanie?
had to he had Yeah, he had to scavenge a lot of that element 115, you know, through subterfuge to build the ship that could create big enough gravity fields to punch holes in space time. So he knows they're not going to be happy about that. They want to get their hands on his technology. Um, they stumble into some space pirates.
Yes.
And yeah,
I love a good space pirate.
yeah, yar, yeah. um, yeah. So and then the beings that are whose space they're invading, by leaving our dimensions, yeah, again, aren't happy about it, and they're. I don't want to give away too much. I really don't. I'm afraid if I say much more, I'm going to give away part of the
Oh
mystery.
yeah.
But just know there's some spooky, extremely powerful
Ooh.
entities that don't like this guy either.
Yes.
Nobody likes this guy. Melanie doesn't either.
Oh, we've got Christopher Froby in the chat who says, extremely enjoyed the first book and am looking forward to reading the second book. So, hey, Froby, thank you. Oh, and then we've got Chris Weave who says, yay, atomic rockets. I missed you earlier. Hey, Chris. All right. So, this is obviously a series about aliens. Let's talk about some of the alien races because I love hearing about cleverly designed aliens. So, first question is, what's your favorite race that you invented for this series? And also just what are some of the cooler ones that you enjoyed coming up with?
Well, I got to own up to something. I did not invent many races here. This is one of those where I did some research into all of the UFO stories because, again, I wanted to have some fun with it. Now, having said that, one of the things that Tony Weisskopf insisted on when I pitched these books was that I want real aliens. I want real, aliens, and I took that to mean he doesn't want original series Star Trek with blue body paint and
humans with
spaghetti
paint on them. Yeah.
on their heads. Yeah. So some of the ones I invented, there's one the race that can see into these other dimensions are basically disembodied brains. It's like a huge gel sack with a giant brain, and they get around on these little feelers, kind of like a CNN.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The space pirates, they're kind of these slug-like creatures with four pairs of arms and legs that can do double duty. They have this kind of snake-like um, um, retractable isn't the word. What is the word I'm looking for? My English major brain is failing here, but kind of a serpentine neck with a hammerhead. They've got plasma swords because they're pirates, so there's got to be swords, but it can't just be metal. And I can't use lightsabers for reasons. I don't make enough to fight off those kind of lawsuits. Let's see. The Thubans. This was based on more UFO lore, so reptilian aliens. They're 7 foot tall, kind of highly evolved dinosaurs, and they're the Union's defenders. They're the warrior race, and funnily enough, they end up being Melanie's tribe in the Union. They're the ones that she gets along with the best. And her best friend is one named Chonk. That's not his real name. All of the alien characters have nicknames that she's invented because their real names are unpronounceable. And that was the other thing I had a little bit of fun with is all the alien names, they're full of apostrophes and consonants and stuff like that, which created problems with the audiobook because
oh my gosh,
they had to call me like, yeah, how do the producer was like, okay, how's our narrator going to pronounce these? I'm like, crap, didn't think of that.
I've run into that too, especially as most of my books have started finding a lot of their primary success in audio form. I've started writing my books with my narrators in mind. and they appreciate it. But I also like to have fun with. I write primarily fantasy, so naturally I also like to have fun with crazy words and crazy spellings. And so many times when I'm drafting, I have to pull myself back and be like, I cannot leave in these silent letters or these unpronounceable things. I have to think of the narrators. And
Yep, yep. So I was a little more conscious of
mhm,
that with this book. And some of the others are the standard UFO story aliens, the grays.
mhm,
Um, another one is Nordics. That was another one from UFO lore. They're kind of Scandinavian
mhm.
looking, not quite human. You can tell there's something off, different
That's
about
one of the
them.
first races
They
she
play.
meets in book one, right? If I yeah,
Yeah,
like that.
I decided they were kind of the Union's diplomats, so I call them the
Hmm.
emissaries. And then there's insectoid aliens, and one that I invented for this is uh, his name's Booger, and this is a pet that she picks up late in the story through basically a search and rescue run that they go on to a derelict
Hmm.
ship, and it's kind of a combination of an otter and a big salamander, but with 6 legs.
Oh my gosh, I love him already. Like I haven't even read this book and I already love him.
Well, give me 1 second.
Do you have like a plush toy? Do you have? Oh, I'm excited.
He's based on this guy.
Oh, I want to pet him. I'm trying to pet him through the internet. You have to deliver pets for me.
Yeah, yeah. This is Pippin. Um, I've kind of nicknamed him Booger, and he had the zoomies bad one day
Oh,
when I was writing, and I was in these scenes with the search and rescue, and he was just bounding around the house, and I decided I'm writing you into this book. So
perfect.
yeah, yeah, Booger the space dachshund.
I love him. All right. So, did you have a particular scene that was your favorite in this book? Favorite to write? If it's not a spoiler scene.
No, no. The ones I got the most fulfillment out of were the um, the ending chapters. The climax is
Oh
always
yeah.
fun because I never quite know how it's going to turn out.
Hmm.
I have it in my head and in a rough outline of what's going to happen, the story arc. About a rough 1 paragraph outline for each chapter. But as I get deeper and deeper into it, the characters start changing their minds on
Hmm.
me, and things don't unfold in a way that I thought they were going to. So. Um, so there's a big climactic couple of chapters, and then she finally gets home, and those last 2 or 3 chapters I really enjoyed writing.
Hmm.
Um, some of it was kind of personal, and you know um, when I pitched the story first 3 years ago to Tony, and I had been thinking about it for a good year before that. It takes me a while to write because I really have to think things through and have that story firmly in my head. And if it's a hard sci-fi,
Hmm.
I got to make sure I understand the underlying technology well enough to make it an important part of the story. In this case, not so much. Although the medical stuff was kind of a big hurdle for me
Hmm.
because I have zero medical background. So there was a lot of running stuff by Melissa and people that she's worked with and things like that. Um, but anyway, I guess I'm getting kind of off track. Um, yeah, I didn't realize it when I pitched it, but as I started outlining it and then writing it, I realized that in a sense I was kind of telling our own story. We had moved out of state uh, 6 years ago, um, down to the Nashville area, and it was a very difficult time. Moving to a new area that you're not familiar with is hard enough, but then this was right before COVID,
Oh.
so yeah, we were feeling even more cut off, and things kept dragging on and on and on, and we just got tired of feeling isolated, and we were using all our vacation time to come back up here to see family and friends in Ohio. So we decided, why don't we use our vacation for actual vacation and go home. But considering the way things were around that time, it was very difficult to do, and for a while we couldn't see any way to do it. And so that 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 kind of made it hard to write. I won't lie, because I had to dig deep, to some emotions that I had left
Oh yeah.
behind and didn't really want to revisit, but I had to convey that mood into the story. I mean, that's what's driving Melanie, and so the fulfillment of that when she gets back home, that was a blast. I probably wrote 3 chapters in a day
Oh
and a half.
wow.
And yeah, because it was one of those times where you're
Everything's
in the
just flowing.
zone and it's just flowing and you're not in control. Your fingers are typing out the movie that's going in your head.
Cool. All right, let's see here. By the way, guys, in the chat, if you have any questions for Patrick, go ahead and pop them in there, and I will ask him. Let's see here, because we're getting pretty close to the end of our little thing. So before we do that, though, I'm going to put some links back in the chat. So again, if you guys want to try to win a signed copy of The Long Way Home, that is in the chat right now. If you want to just go ahead and grab a copy, I am popping that in the chat as well. And then again, if you want to read any other Bane books or any other of Patrick's books, that website is there as well. And let's see, I had another question, but I have completely forgotten what it is. Oh, so since there is sort of a big kind of chase element to this novel, would you say there's also quite a bit of sci-fi adventure mixed up in with the hard sci-fi? Or
Oh,
nice.
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, the whole book is just sci-fi adventure. Um, it's kind of one crisis to the next, and Melanie trying to keep it together because she's got this elderly, kind of obnoxious human patient that he's brought her on basically as a flight nurse. To keep him alive until they get back to Earth. And yeah, and sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I saw a question pop up that intrigued me. Yeah,
I can
yeah,
pop
my
that
mind went
question up while you're
squirrel.
thinking. So, is there any chance that the
Yeah.
Orbit series and the MECHS series are going to meet?
No, no, these are completely two different worlds. Think of it. The Orbit series, that is near future, hard sci-fi, techno thriller, and whereas the Interstellar Medic is space opera, sci-fi adventure. So those two are not going to meet. However, I can say that the Orbit series and my second Bane book, Frontier, are absolutely going to. So I'm brainstorming a plot for a third Orbit book, Terminal Orbit, and so that's going to wrap that up in a nice little trilogy. But I've really been wanting to revisit the characters from Frontier because there's some great characters in that story. It's I mentioned my Tom Clancy influence. This is what, when I set out to write it, it's like, okay, if Tom Clancy had written sci-fi, what would it look like? And this is Frontier is it. It is Jack Ryan in space. And but that came out in 21, so it's been out for a while. It would be hard to just write a sequel to that, especially when I've got the Eccentric Orbits series to wrap up. However, they occur in the same universe. There's character crossover between both already. The main characters from Frontier are in Escape Orbit. And so the third book I'm plotting right now, Terminal Orbit, is going to bring those characters more into the forefront. So, they're not going to dominate the story, but they're going to play a big part in it. And, so I see it as a way, again, to wrap the Orbit books up into a nice trilogy and give the Frontier crew a springboard into new adventures.
Nice.
So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Are there any plans for an Interstellar Medic 3 yet, or does 2 wrap it up?
Not firm plans, but I did leave the ending wide open for more.
Nice.
I mean, it's yeah. You get to the very end, and there's no mistake that there's going to be more happening in Melanie's world.
Nice.
And so the working title that's in my head in a very very rough story is The Long Way Back.
I love the repeating themes in the titles.
That should give people a clue as to what's going to happen.
Nice. All right. Well, for those who we're going to start wrapping up here, but for those who want to meet you at a con or at a signing or get books signed, where can they do that? You have any cons or anything coming up this year?
Unfortunately, no. We had to miss LibertyCon this year, which I hate. That was the second year in a row. That was not planned at all. We just too many other commitments and not enough vacation time between Melissa and I to make any out-of-state conventions. And Marcon here in Columbus was going to be in May, and it had to cancel, unfortunately.
Oh, that's a bummer. Maybe next year.
So yeah, I'm afraid I'm afraid this year I don't have any plans for any public appearances.
That'll just make next year's more exciting then.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting back to LibertyCon.
Oh, I am too. We missed this year too because we had a family reunion that overlaid it. But Jacob and I are actually going to be masters of ceremony at next year's LibertyCon. So yes,
I saw
excited for that.
I saw that. Hold on to your shorts, people.
Oh yeah, it's going to be an interesting one.
It's going to be lit, as the kids say.
Yes. All right. Well, this has been fun. So thank you for joining me. Like everyone in the chat, thanks for hanging out. We had some really good questions. Again, go and if you want to enter to win a signed copy. Oh, wait, we got another question. Good timing, Glenn. Let's see. Oh, the chat is still moving. Let's see. Chris Weave mentions Concoction Cleveland in March. I'm not familiar with that one. But if you like cons, that's one to try. Let's see here. And Glenn asks, let's see, do you fall into having a great idea for Interstellar, but you're writing other series? I guess if you while you're working on other series, do you have other ideas for Interstellar Medic and
oh yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah.
Do you
just kidding me? The idea tap in my head never turns off. Which one is waking me up at 4 a.m? Which characters are having arguments in my head while I'm in the shower. I mean, you're either schizophrenic or you're a writer. Make your choice. So
yes, there are so many similarities between writers and yes, but that actually leads me to another question of mine. Do you generally work on one series at a time, or do you switch between series? Because I know some authors are just not content to work on one. I have to work on one because otherwise my brain will just melt.
But, yeah, I can't. I mean, honestly, I know some writers have 2 or 3 projects going at once. I can't. I mean, number one, I don't have time to. My day job is full time. I'm fortunate enough to be able to work from home. So I always say that 2 hours a day I don't waste sitting in traffic is when I get my writing done. Mm-hmm. And when I was writing close to full time, I got better at the process. I could, I learned to be able to do more quickly. So yeah, if I can, in 2 hours, when I get into the zone, I mean, I can easily crank out 600 or 700 words, in an hour and a half. Well, 5 days a week of that, in about 8 to 9 months, you've got a full 100,000 word novel.
Yep.
So, yeah, that keeps me on pace to write about, one a year, maybe some short stories in between. I am working on a short story right now.
Nice.
Yeah. Cause I don't see having a full novel ready to release next year, but this is going to be in an anthology that Jason Cordova's editing that comes out next summer. And nice. There's going to be a little military sci-fi in it. Melanie's going to basically get drafted into being a combat medic.
Ah.
So And so a little idea of what I have in mind for the long way back.
Cool. All right. Oh, and speaking of Jason Cordova edited anthologies, just because it's timely, Dancing with Destruction just came
Yeah.
out this week, same day as Interstellar Medic, and last I checked, I think it actually reached #1 on Amazon's sci-fi anthologies list.
Yeah, I
But
saw that.
yes, but Jacob and I have a story in this one, in his Soul Blazers slash Freelancers of Neptune universe. So if you want a scrappy crew space adventure homage to 80s action movies, check it out. But there's also plenty of other amazing stories in this as well. I never know what way to move the book because it keeps moving out of camera, but it's called Dancing with Destruction and it's awesome. So another Bane book. Well, we are close to the end of our hour, so I think I'm going to start wrapping it up. So again, Patrick, tell us where we can find all of your stuff.
Well, of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, um, Apple Books, wherever you can buy books, whether it's online or in bookstores. Barnes and Noble, brick and mortar stores, Books a Million. Um, anywhere fine books are sold. If you don't see it at your local bookstore, ask them to stock it, please. Well, I mean, I don't know if you talked about this with other writers, on your podcast, but it is harder to get books into stores now.
Yep.
Because Barnes and Noble, they don't have a central buyer anymore to decide how many copies to buy, which stores to send it to. Each store decides on their own. So unless you're already a bestseller, it's just that much harder to get their attention and get your books out there. So I encourage everybody to if there's something you want and they don't have it, ask them to stock it. And most of the time,
guys, if you don't want to buy or don't have the budget to buy, go to your local library and ask if they have it. And if they don't have it, most libraries have forms you can fill out where you request books. Like my library is awesome about it because I'll fill out the form and if they get it, they immediately tell me so I can go pick it up. And that's pretty cool. But that's another great alternative to contacting stores and asking them to carry it as well. But yeah, so much book buying is done online these days that brick and mortar stores, it's a finicky part of book selling these days for both booksellers and for authors. And so, but guys, if you want to see.
And I can't hold it against Barnes and Noble for doing what they did because they were in real trouble for a while there.
Oh yeah.
And it looks like this model is working for them. So I'm happy that they're going to be around. I'd rather have them still here and harder to get into than impossible because they don't exist.
Yeah, right. I love a good Barnes and Noble. Like with our local Barnes and Noble closed. There's several in our area, but the one I grew up with closed, and it feels like there is a gap in my heart. Like I know I can go to 2 other ones in my city, but that was my home one. But
we got some great ones. We got some great ones here in Columbus. Very large, very well stocked, and very willing to put my work on their shelves. So every time I do, I go by and sign everything that they have. The other thing I like to do is when I'm traveling for my day job is I call it my low rent book tour. And I look up the local bookstores, whether it's a chain or indie, and see if they have my books in stock. I will make it a point to go by there and sign whatever they have.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yep.
That's cool.
And most of the time though, they're going to want to put it on their Instagram or Facebook page. So, it's free publicity.
Nice. All right, this is turning into a very Southern goodbye. I feel like we've ended it like 3 times. That just
Midwest goodbyes are the same.
Midwest goodbye, yeah, they're just the same goodbye, different accents. All right, well, once again, everyone, if you want to try to enter to win a signed copy of Interstellar Medic 2, go in the comments and do that, or go in the show notes. I will draw the winner tomorrow, so it gives everyone a chance to get their stuff in, because I used to draw it right after the podcast, but then right after I drew my winner, I'd get 10 more entries like the second after, and so now I wait a little bit to give everyone a good chance. But you can win a free copy. Thank you, chat. It's been an active chat tonight. You all had great questions, and of course, thank you, Patrick, for joining me tonight. This was a whole lot of fun.
It's always fun being here.
Oh yes. Bye.
I hope to see you guys at some conventions next year.
Oh yeah, you definitely will. We've got at least LibertyCon on our list, and I feel like
Well, I hope you remember us little people when you're emceeing LibertyCon.
of course, we're still little people. We're just little people with titles now, apparently. All right. See you next time, Patrick.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.